Wherever you're joining me from in the world today, welcome to the Atelier. In today's lesson, I'm going to be showing you how to machine that beautiful scarlet lining, and then I'm going to be actually basting it into the back of the jacket. You're not going to want to miss this lesson. That's what's happening today in the Atelier. All right, let's get busy working on our lining for the back. Tricky, yeah? So if you remember what we did originally when we laid out our lining cloth, okay, we actually added about a 1/2 centimeter extra cloth, okay, here at the side, all right? So I'm just lining all of this up nicely. You know, lining, it's all slippery, and so I want to line it up. I've got my length here. I put a chalk line to help me get to my length again. And like I said, I want to get all of this lined up with the edge nicely. Okay, there. Okay, here, all that lined up nice. Okay, all right. So let's go over this. If we have to draw a line back in here a little bit, we will, okay? I'll get another weight and we'll put it right there. All right, so if you remember, we left 3 centimeters of inlay on our cloth piece along the center back seam, okay? What we want to do, or what we did do when we cut our lining, is we actually left 3.5 centimeters, okay, to give us a little bit more width in the back of our lining so that we can create some ease, okay? Because what the last thing we want is to do this with our jacket on or our coat on and have it be like, and just rip up the back because the lining's too tight, okay? So I'm just coming in here and looking. My line for that 1/2 centimeter is really faded, okay? So I'm going to come in and I'm just going to draw that 1/2 centimeter in again, because that 1/2 centimeter is going to be where I sew, okay, or I machine the back center seam. So that's the first thing that we need to do today, is machine the back center seam. So let's get that bad boy drawn in here nicely, right? So we can see it. Yeah? And then if you remember too, we squared this down from the length, right? We squared it down. All right, so we're going to do that. And then here, I'm just going to continue to add a 1 centimeter, or excuse me, a 1/2 centimeter guideline for myself, okay? So across the entire back of the jacket, we're adding 1 centimeter, okay, of additional width, okay, which we'll use to create some ease. So that's number 1. Okay. Now, and the other thing is we left a 1 centimeter seam up here. We left the same inlay over here at the side, okay, so we didn't leave any more inlay at the arm side, all right? That's still the same. All right? Now, the other thing that is really important to think about is, because we kind of went off the traditional beaten path with this coat, okay? In other words, it's not a traditional coat. We were putting a beautiful pleat down the back, et cetera, all right? That pleat that we're putting in will also provide some ease. So where we have to worry about it getting really tight, okay, is where the yoke and the back of the jacket come together, all right? So when I created my yoke, or when I cut out my lining for my yoke, if you remember, I added that same 1 centimeter or 1/2 centimeter of inlay that I did for the back of the jacket. So when we put it all together, all right, we should have an additional 1 centimeter of width for the bottom of the jacket, okay? And then an additional 1 centimeter of width for the yoke, all right? Hopefully that all makes sense to you. Now, a couple ways you can go about doing this. If you want to get on the machine, and before you get on the machine, if you want to baste this together, okay, you can do that, all right? I am not going to baste this together, but instead what I'm going to do, because everything's lined up real nice here, is I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to put a few pins in, okay, just to hold these two pieces together nicely. Now, if, like I said, if you want to baste this together, fantastic. I'm also using a plain cloth, right? So that makes things super, super simple. If I was using some sort of print or plaid, I would absolutely match it along the center back seam, okay? And I would absolutely baste it together to make sure that that print or plaid matched throughout the entire length of the back center seam. But since I decided to take it a little easy on myself for this project, we don't have to worry about that. So a few pins here and there are going to do fine. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go on the machine and we're going to zippity-doo-dah up this seam, okay? That's step one. And then when we come back, I'll show you how we'll baste in the pleat and get the yoke put on, all right? So I'll be right back on the machine to show you how to pull this all together. All right, so here we are at my lovely little Juki. And what I've done is I've actually went ahead and switched out my thread. So I have nice crimson red thread to go with my beautiful lining, yeah? All right, so what I'm going to do here is just so simple, okay? I'm just going to match up my ends. I've got a little zha-zha there, don't worry about that, okay? And let's get this into the machine here. All right, so I've created this nice guideline for myself, okay? And, you know, what's really important, whenever you sit down to machine, the first thing you should do is make sure that you have enough thread here so that when you go to start sewing, the thread doesn't come out of the needle, because that's super frustrating, because I've never done that before, right? Okay, the second thing is it's always a really good idea to just get your needle positioned into the cloth as I have here, okay? So that way nothing's going to slip or fall or get out of alignment, okay? Check your tension. Of course, I think my tension is fine. And then we are using, out of a stitch length of 5 at the max, we're using 2.5. All right, so what I'm going to do here is just very simple. I'm just going to follow that nice chalk line that I put in, okay? And I'm going to keep the two pieces of cloth together here, lining together. Of course, my needles are helping me with that, but as I take a needle out, because I don't like to skip over the needles on my machine for some reason, it just doesn't work very well, okay? What I'm trying to do here is make sure that the cloth is being fed through the machine nice and even. In other words, this isn't falling off and draping all over, okay? That's really important, especially with lining, because lining is just such a pain in the keister to work with anyway. It slips, and the slightest little slip can make a big difference in how everything comes together, okay? So we're just gonna zip right up through here, okay? Everything's looking good so far. So far, so good. And I think the big thing is just to make sure that these two, edges here are coming together nicely. And I really focused more on matching my edge over here, which is my raw edge. If my inlay's off a little bit here, it's not a disaster, okay? Just FYI. I want my raw edges to be matching. Okay? And then when I get to the very top here, of course, I'm just going to very lightly backstitch and finish that off, okay? All right, so that's it. That's as easy as that is, okay? Come on. These little scissors are actually my mom's. She used them from the day she bought her sewing machine. So they're like older than me, which is hard to believe that anything is older than me, but that's okay. All right, so here we have, as you can see now, we've got everything sewn up real nice. The tension looks great on that, okay? And what we're gonna do now is we're gonna go back over to the work table and we're going to bring together first the pleat, and then we're gonna bring the yoke together and sew that all together as well, okay? So I'll meet you back over at the work table. Okay, so we've got the back sewn up. Now, what we need to do next, okay, while I sit here and get a little organized, is we need to press this open. And if you remember, when we went ahead and we sewed up the back, okay, of the jacket, of the coat, all right, we pushed the inlay off to one side, okay? In fact, I pushed it exactly like this because, let's make sure I'm holding this right, yeah, because the fold of the cloth was away from me, and that's how I pick stitched the back, okay? So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna fold this in the opposite direction and open this up real nice, okay? That way I don't have two inlays, one on the jacket or the coat and one on the lining, laying on top of each other and adding a lot of thickness, okay? We don't want that because we don't open our seams, right? We're not gonna open our seam like this. We just don't do that in tailoring. We push it off to the side, okay? So here, I'm gonna push it towards me, all right, because I did the other, I did the inlay the other way on the coat, and then I'm just gonna pull this a little bit and press this open to open the seam up real nice, okay? We want that seam completely open. And I'm not using any water because unfortunately, I believe that this lining will stain. I'll get a big watermark. All right, so see here how this kind of folded. That's a no bueno situation. And because this is lining, we can just come in here and press it right on the right side. Right, it's already shiny. We don't have to worry about burning it. Okay, so we'll just keep doing that. I think it's easier to do it that way. We can actually see whether it's open or not. You know, if we see the stitches, we know it's open. Pretty simple. All right, so there's that. I'll just move this down. Okay. All right. Just a little bit more down here. Here we go. Oop. All right. Beautiful. I think that looks pretty good. We got a little piece right there that's not cooperating. Okay. All right, so fantastic. So we have that all pressed open nice. Isn't that pretty? God, is that gorgeous? I love it. All right, so, all right, Marlene, stop admiring yourself here, right? God. All right, so the other thing that we have to do now is we have to find and mark, I'm not sure, you know, let's bring the baby back over, seriously. We have to find and mark where our pleat is going, yeah? So here's my pleat. I'm going to mark it on both sides here, okay? And I've got it there, all right? And when we turn it over, we'll just measure and make sure that this is accurate, because it should be, what did I make that? I believe, that's why it's always good to have your pattern handy to double check things, all right? So I made that a 5 centimeter pleat, okay? Which means because I added a 1/2 centimeter for that width, okay, I should have 5.5, all right? So here, let's mark it absolutely spot on, okay? Let's just mark it absolutely spot on. Not kind of 5.5, but definitely 5.5. All right? Accuracy is important. It is. All right, so what I'm going to do now that we have all this pressed out so nicely, not quite. I want that open. There. It's just a little bit, it's being a little argumentative with me. It's really important that this seam is really opened up completely, or it's, things just aren't going to work out the way we want, okay? All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take and fold this pleat right onto the seam, okay? Just like that. And we're going to put a little pin in that, okay? So I folded this over. I want to make sure it's all even, all underneath, okay? So it can be a little challenging because it is lining. It can be a little difficult, okay? But we want it to be completely perfect here. So even if we do that and make sure it's nice and even, okay? And then we can put a pin and hold that just like so, okay? I gotta be honest with you guys, I'm really glad I didn't pick a print for this. Or I think I would be dropping a few expletives. All right. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so here as well. And so what I'm looking, let me get this other pin in and then I'm going to show you something here. This is important, okay? So what I'm doing is I'm not just bringing this pleat over and matching it at the seam. I want to make sure that what's going on under here is correct too. So I don't want like this falling here, and I want all of this to line up. You see that? Okay, there. And on this side as well, here. So it should all line up nice, okay? Be nice and squared, if you will. All right? And now, again, we talked about this with the back. We don't want this to be pressed all the way down to the bottom, right? But we do want to put a little bit, we do want to press this a little bit right here, okay? Just like that, just like that. Just to give it that little bit of a crease and hold it in nice, okay? So this is all coming together. Of course, my pin, oh, that's hot. Hello. Careful of your little fingers, all right? Okay, so we have that, which looks lovely, all right? And now, man, I feel like, you're gonna laugh at me. I feel like this is like a Superman cape. You know what I mean? It does, it looks like a Superman cape. Well, I could be Superwoman, you never know. All right, so what we need to do now, okay, is we're going to put the yoke on, and this yoke should match up perfectly, which it does, Look at that. Perfect there. This is where, I added the extra centimeter here. That lines up perfect there. And then perfect over here. Okay. So what I'm going to do on this is I am going to baste this because this is way too much cloth to handle at one time on the machine. If I just pin it, I know it's going to be a disaster. So I'm just going to baste this across. I've got a guideline here of where I'm going to be sewing 1 centimeter back, okay? So I'm not going to baste on that, obviously. I'm just going to baste a little bit off of that 1 centimeter seam. And of course, before I start, I'm going to trim a little of this silt off because guaranteed, right? This is going to get caught up in my thread, and then I'm going to get irritated. The silt drives me crazy. Okay. All right, so let's start over here. This is lovely, okay? And we're just going to match this up precisely. Because remember, the other thing that's really super important is that our arm side has to match, right? Now we did add a little bit of inlay, all right, on the lining at the shoulder. We did add inlay, and we did that because we need to have enough lining to go up and over the shoulder pad. Remember, we're going to put a little bit of the shoulder pad in this. And so if we didn't add a little extra lining or inlay at the shoulder, okay, we wouldn't have enough room to fold and create a seam, all right? So it's really important that we do that, all right? So here I'm just very carefully making sure my edges match up nicely here, okay? Just basting this, just a nice medium baste. It doesn't have to be anything too tiny. All right, you do want to always, I'm always an advocate of keeping your stitches close together. So, about a 1/2 centimeter in between each one is good enough. Yeah. And just a nice running baste, matching at each stitch because lining is slippery, as you know. Okay. Here, let's make sure that's all lining up. Yeah, this loves to slip around. You see that? See here? This is just slipping around a little bit. Let's get that on par, shall we? Yeah. So it's not all over the place. Otherwise, we'll have a pleat that's kind of droopy. We don't want droopy pleats. No droopy pleats, right? Okay. So we'll get this finished up nice here. And we're going to get on the machine and bring it all together. So as I go over this, my pleat, okay, I'm just going to make my stitches just a slight bit smaller, okay? So I'm sure that everything is being held together nicely when I take those pins out. And I can take that one out now. There we go. Here, just want to bring all that together. In fact, I might just hold that. There we go. Pardon my hands maybe being in the way, but I just want to hold all of those layers of the pleat together to ensure that they're correct. Okay? There we go. That's all we needed to do there. And then the rest we'll just finish off here real quick. The Superman cape. That's what it is. It looks like a Superman. His red cape, remember? Oh, God. So when I was a little kid, I'm a Generation Xer. And so we were never home, ever. We were always out riding our bikes. And so I asked my mom, because my mom was a sewer, obviously. That's how I learned. I was friends with these two twin boys up the street from me, and we used to ride around pretending that we were Batman and Robin and Batgirl. And so I asked my mom if she would make us capes and masks, and she did. And so we all had these like really cool capes, and we'd be on our bikes riding around the neighborhood. We'd be like, da-na-na-na-na-na-na, Batman. And we'd be looking to see if our cape was flying behind us. Pretty cool. That's a good memory. That's a nice memory. Mary was good that way. She would do anything. She made us all our costumes, Halloween costumes, and so good. Superman. Or Batman. Batgirl. Yeah. All right, so when I wear my beautiful swing coat, I'll pretend I have a Superman cape on the inside, okay? Oh, that's funny. Okay, here we go. Beautiful. So that's ready. All right, so you can see now I've basted that all together. It's, let's get this other pin out. Let's just double check and make sure. You see back here how everything is lined up real nice? That's what you're looking for, okay? You don't want this to be falling off. You want it to lay even with it all, okay? So we're gonna get back on the machine and zippity-doo-dah this, and then I'll show you how to open this up, and the lining will be ready to put into the garment, okay? So I'll meet you back over at the machine. All right, so same rules apply as before. I'm just going to bring my foot in here. All right, I've got the same settings as I had before. 2.5 for stitch length, okay? I've got my guideline here to follow, and I can just go ahead and maybe bring this forward a couple stitches here and tack it off and bring it back, okay? Just to tack it. And here we'll just follow very carefully our nice 1 centimeter seam. This is really important, so I'm just going to take it a little bit slower here. And what I like to do is I like to make sure that my chalk line is like literally right in between the 2 feet here, okay? So, and then the other thing is be aware of what's happening underneath. Did you see what was happening here? We want to make sure that that pleat is smooth and laying flat and even, okay? We don't want it to get folded in the wrong direction. In fact, it's not a bad idea to try and open up your garment here as best you can. I know it's lining and it's slippery, but it's nice to open it up and make sure it's where it should be, okay? I know all these little things make a difference when you're machining something. It's really important to pay attention to what you're doing. Always be aware of what's happening on the other side of your garment, especially when you're, when we're doing pockets especially. You always want to be aware of what's happening. All right, so just nice and slow. And we're going to get to the end here. And again, I'll just tack this off very lightly. Okay? And that's that. Oh my God. All this back and forth, back and forth. But we have that machined up nicely. And what we'll need to do, obviously, is take our basting stitch out. Okay? And we're going to press this. So I'll meet you back over at the work table and we'll get that knocked out. All right. So we've got this now, right? All put together. What I need to do is just take this basting stitch out. Yeah, and today I did remember to make sure I knew where my seam ripper was. All right, and we're going to do the same thing as what I did with the back of the coat, okay? I'm going to press this so that the yoke, okay, overlaps my jacket, okay? just like that. We're going to press this open. Real nice. So we're going to open that seam up. Okay. In fact, just want to make sure I'm good in the back here. Just had a little issue coming over my pleat. So we're going to do it this way first. All right, take a look. Just open this up a little bit more here. All right. So it's nice and open. All right. So what we need to do next, now that we've got our lining all beautifully put together, okay, is we need to actually baste it into the jacket. And so that's going to be a fun exercise because honestly, this is the first time I'm going to be basting some lining in that's a little different than your traditional jacket. So I'm going to be using the same thought process in terms of adding some ease. All right, we're going to approach it that way. All right, so I just want to press this out a little more, nicely here. Okay, just get this little guy pressed down so he looks perfect. Yeah, let's have a look on the back. Yes. Yeah. All right, so it's a little jiggly. I would like this to be nice and straight here, but I think we'll mess around with that a little bit more later. I'll mess around with it off camera. You don't need to sit here and watch me mess around with this lining. It'll just get too frustrating. All right, so what we're going to do, okay, when I come back, we're going to start basting the lining into the back of the jacket. So that's going to be a really fun exercise to do together, okay? So we'll be right back with that. All right, so we've got now our lining all done. We've got the back of our jacket all made up. And now what we need to do is we need to baste these two pieces together, okay? Now, the real important thing in working with lining, as we mentioned when we put the lining in the front of the jacket, what we're trying to do is we're trying to create both vertical and horizontal ease so that we don't create any tightness in our lining, okay? So the very first thing that I've done here is I took my lining and I laid it wrong side up, okay? So my lining is laying wrong side up like this right now, okay? And of course I pressed out the pleat real nice, okay? So that's good. So I did that. Now what I want to do is I want to bring the cloth onto the lining, okay? And we want to line everything up. So I want to line up the yoke, the seam for the yoke here, okay? Let me move this down a little so you can see where I'm working. I want to line up the seam for the yoke right here along on the cloth with the yoke for the seam on the lining. And so what I'm going to do, because this little guy right here seems to be a little stubborn and want to go his own way, so I'm just going to go ahead and put a little pin here temporarily to hold this. And this is just where the yoke from the lining and the yoke for the jacket come to, not the yoke and the pleat, okay, come together, where those two come together, all right? Now I can line the seam up nicely here, okay, on the left side. and line up the seam nicely here on the right side. So we want everything lining up real nice. And if we just have to go in, this is a little bit more, I guess I would say, complicated because we have a yoke, okay, and it wants to do, because the seam is opening, it wants to move, you see? So we just have to be, or the pleat is opening. See how it's kind of V-ing? And that's okay, that's all right. Because the way we're gonna go about basting this, I'm not gonna worry about that right now, okay? The next thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make sure that my seam for the jacket, for the cloth, okay, is lining up with the seam for my lining. And I can feel that, okay? I can feel that here, all right, with my fingers. And I can also tell what's lining up because you can see here there's a little bit more lining on this side, okay, than on this side. And we left exactly a 1/2 centimeter, okay? So we should have a 1/2 centimeter coming off the side here, all right? Each side should have about a 1/2 centimeter, okay? Easy. All right, so once we have that all lined up, yes. Get that lined up there. Okay, so once we have the seam lined up and we know that the yoke is lined up nicely, what we're gonna do is we're gonna come in here and we're gonna do our very first baste. And that base is going to run down the center back seam, okay? So we're gonna bring the center back seam for both the lining. I just wanna check this. It doesn't seem to be lining up here for me, okay. Center back seam for the lining with the center back seam for the cloth, okay? That's our very first base that we're gonna do. And this is really important because this is gonna add, okay, this is gonna add a nice amount of ease right down the center of the jacket, okay? All right, so we have that. And a nice big basting needle, which is good, okay? All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start right here at the top, the very top of my pleat. I'm gonna come in here, all right? And I'm just gonna tack this off nicely, okay? And I'm gonna baste, and my baste, as I'm basting, what I'm doing is I'm feeling to make sure that my center back seam on the lining is matching up with the center back seam on my cloth, okay? My basting stitches are going to be about 2 centimeters long, so not very big, okay? And what I'm doing as I baste, you see, I'm pushing the center back seam with my finger. Do you remember when we were canvassing the front of the jacket, right? And I pushed my finger like this to create ease between the cloth and the canvas. We're doing the same thing now, okay? Doing the same thing now to bring those two together. Now, of course, this is not a permanent baste. We'll be taking this out once we have the whole jacket put together, so that lining, the amount of ease that we put in the lining will always be there, okay? It'll always be there, okay? So again, I'm just continuing to push and create some ease between the cloth and the lining as I baste, okay? This is a little different. It's similar, but a little different than what we would do with a traditional jacket like either of these, okay? In both of those jackets, because we don't have this fashion pleat. We actually create a pleat in the lining, okay? So there is a small pleat up top that runs down the center of the jacket, all right, and all the way from the top of the very top of the nape down to the bottom. All right. Here, our pleat that we put in at the top is going to provide a lot of movement and ease as well, okay? But we need to create some vertical ease by doing this. Okay? Makes sense, I hope. I hope. Okay. Perfect. And again, just like I did in the front of my jacket, okay, when I get down here to the bottom, I'm not going to come all the way down to the length, okay, because I have to leave enough room to turn up my lining, okay? So I'm going to stop short about 5 or 6 centimeters of the bottom here. Here's my length, okay? So I'm probably going to stop short about here, just so that I don't have a problem trying to turn up the length and get the lining in shape, okay? So we'll just tack this off right about here. Perfect. All right. Now, if we, you know what? Oh, hold on. Oh. Left my scissors on the other side of the table. Oh, Marlene. Okay. So if we turn this over now, okay, you can see the ease. See the ease that we put in? Isn't that nice? That's going to be really nice. It's going to hold that in beautifully. And I can take out this pin now. I don't need that anymore. That's going to be held in nicely on its own. Okay? So that looks beautiful. That ease. And, you know, we still have enough here, right? That 1/2 centimeter on either side. Okay? So that's going to be beautiful. And remember, the other important thing too is we also left quite a bit of excess in the front at the side body, okay? Because again, remember, we're going to be sewing that together. We're going to be basting, top stitching, and pick stitching. And we have a 1 centimeter seam here and a 1 centimeter seam on the side body. So you might be looking at this going, oh man, there's not a lot there. There's going to be plenty because we planned it that way. This is going to come over like this. Right? We've got a 1 centimeter seam. This is coming over like this. So it's all going to come together beautifully. No worries. Okay? And remember, the cloth is going to fall the same way. All right? Now, the second base that we're going to do is going to come around the shoulder blade area. Okay? So what I want to do is I want to come straight out like so. Okay? And when I get about halfway across this area here, all right, I'm going to start bringing my my base down and out, not too far, okay, and around like so. All right, that's what that's going to look like. And I'm going to come to this middle stripe right here, and I'm going to base the rest of the way down like so. Okay? So it's going to look like a little bit of a heart. It's going to look like a little bit of a heart. Now, why do we do this? And in fact, you know, I just want to draw that again because it's a little wide, okay? So I'm going to come like this, and then I'm going to come around like that and down like so, okay? So it's going to look something like that. Now, why do we do this? Well, first of all, you have to remember we have a lot of movement. We talked about this in our shoulder blades in the back of us, right? We're moving our arms all over the place, you know, shrinking our shoulders. And so we want to make sure that we're basting enough ease into that area, okay? That this area here isn't tight in the shoulder blade area. Notice as well too, we're not really doing any basting up here on the yoke. We've got to put a shoulder blade in this area, or excuse me, a shoulder pad in this area. And so I'm going to leave this pretty much to itself, okay? We don't need a lot because we're putting a lot of ease in below that. We're going to be okay with not really putting any ease above it. We have, okay, we have given an extra 0.5 centimeter across the width here. So this is not going to be tight at all, okay? Won't be tight at all. All right, plus the other thing I should say too is we treat the lining a little bit differently when we put the sleeve in. We're actually going to create some ease around the arm side when we baste this closely, okay? So we're going to have a lot of ease created during that point as well, so that we don't have to freak out a whole lot about, okay? All right, so let's make our heart here, shall we? And you know what? Let's just draw it in on the other side. So we have 2 hearts beating as one. All right, so we're going to come out here, and then here. We're going to come around, right, and down, and we're going to pick this stripe down and around like so, and then bring it right through down to this stripe right here, okay? Now, the other thing that's really important, and I can bring this out a little bit further. Here we go. That's better. That looks better, okay? All right. Now, the other thing that's really important to note as well is we want to stay away from the arm side, yes. We also want to stay away from the side seam. Remember, we've got to come in and we've got to baste, top stitch, and pick stitch the entire seam here. I say we, like you're gonna be doing it with me. Well, you have to watch me, I guess, right? And you can just decide how long you want to actually watch me go through those motions, yeah? So trying to get this crazy thing right here. Here we go. That's it better. That's better. Okay. That's it. Okay? Here we go. That's a better looking heart on that side for sure. Okay. So we have to make sure that we're leaving enough room to get the sleeve in, right? So that this isn't like right on top of it. Okay? Hopefully that all makes sense. All right, let's get to it. Let's get this knocked out. And then we can move on to other exciting, fun things in tailoring. Okay? All right, so let me do this. Let's put a couple of weights here. I'm going to put one up here. Yeah, because this moves around quite a bit. And I just want to, this is being very stubborn today, not lining up here. So, there we go. Take that. Okay. All right. And then just going to put one here. Okay, so I'm going to start right here. Just look at this nice dark black line. Let's make sure you can see what I'm doing. Maybe I can bring this down here a little further so you can see, and I'm right in the middle. See me there and you can see me there. That's better. So I'm not off to one side. Let's make sure that's spot on. It's really important. Yeah, there we go. That's better. Okay. All right, so we'll put that there, perfect. Okay, let's get that nice. Okay, so here I'll tack off. And what I'm going to do as I baste across is I'm just going to smooth this. Okay. Get this so that it doesn't move too much on me. Okay, so I'm just going to smooth this out and take a stitch. Now, as I baste, what I'm doing is I'm keeping my stitches relatively small. When I say relatively, it's about maybe 2 centimeters apart, okay? And I'm doing what's almost like a pad stitch, all right? Because I'm basting across here, so I'm not going to baste a straight line, okay? So I'm just going to follow that nice chalk mark that I made. All the way around. Right about here, where I'm about midway through my shoulder, I'm just going to baste this, or excuse me, tack this, okay? And then I'm going to continue smoothing and stitching. So here, I'm going to be coming out, okay, and down. Every stitch is coming out a little bit and down. Okay? So I'm just following that little heart that I made till I come basically around here. And when I get to this stripe, just pull this up a little bit now so you can see what's going on. Okay. So when I get to this stripe, I'm just going to tack it, okay, right here. And then I'm going to smooth it out going down the rest of the back of the jacket. Okay, so like so. Let's move this up a little bit. Okay, so we can put a weight up top, and I'm just going to smooth this with my hand, you see? Very gentle, nothing, like you're petting a little dog, that's all. Like you're petting a little dog, like my little dog Pebbles, my little Pebbles. All right, my stitches are maybe 3 centimeters or so long, not too long, okay? We're still creating ease between the two pieces of cloth. Okay, still creating ease. And again, what I want to do is I want to make sure that I stop about 5 centimeters up like I did before from the bottom. Okay? In fact, that'll put us right about there. Okay? So just about there. Okay, we'll tack it right here. And that'll work perfect, just like that. Okay, so there's that. So if we turn this over now and we take a look, you can see that we've brought all this nice ease in between the first baste, okay, and the shoulder line and so forth, okay, like that. And if we check, we can see we still have that 1/2 centimeter of lining exactly where we need it. So that's a good thing, okay? If I had come in here and this looked like this, or I didn't have any lining showing at all, we'd have to take this out and do it again. All right? Wouldn't be right. Okay, so now we just have to do the same thing over here, which is a little trickier because we have to work towards ourselves now. Okay? Notice, it's really important to notice too, I'm not switching this around, like I'm not bringing this, turning it to do it, okay? It's staying all in the same place. It's very important. We never want to work from the bottom up, always the top down, okay? All right. Just not enough weights in the world to hold all this down for me. And again, let me center myself here so that you can see what I'm doing nicely. Let's double check and make sure this is all lined up nice before we start basting everything together. Yeah, there we go. That's good. All right, put that there. All right, that's better. Okay, all right. So here, now I'll be working towards myself here, very gently. Okay, in fact, I'm going to hold, if you can see, I'm going to hold my pleat and just use my finger to start with, okay? So things don't move around too much. Always want to keep your eye on what's going on, okay? Keep your eye on it. This is, like I said, this is kind of tricky with this pleat. I honestly have never really basted with a pleat like this before. So this is new territory for me, okay? But you know, what works, you know, this basting method is proven, it works. And so why wouldn't it work for this? You just have to contend with your pleat here a little bit, okay? All right, so I'm just going to baste that there to finish that part. And then I'm going to continue to come around here. Come down and around, okay? Smoothing this out nicely. Making sure everything's hunky-dory. Yep, okay. I want my stitches getting too big here. Okay, let's move this up a little bit so you can keep watching. Hopefully it's maybe a little close to me. Let me move this out just slightly so you can see. Yeah? There we go. That's better. All right. And as we come up against our little stripe here, right in the middle, we're going to tack this again. Okay. And then I'm just going to follow this straight down the rest of the way here. All right. So we'll put our weight right up top to hold that, and we'll just smooth this like so going down. Okay. So pretty simple. Yeah. I mean, not too bad. I don't know. I guess the way I look at it is when you know how to do something, it's not that hard. It's when you don't know how to do something and you're trying to figure it out that it becomes a challenge, right? And this is just practice, practice. You know, when you're doing this, you know, getting the shape is, yes, important. So make sure that you use a piece of chalk, you know. Now, I don't know. Hopefully most of the ladies out there know how to draw a heart pretty easily. I don't know. Hopefully you gents do too. Hopefully all of us know how to make a nice heart, yeah? I don't know. I always felt like girls, I don't know, did it more. You know what? I pulled this over a little bit much. Let me take a little of this out here, guys. You see all this? Yeah. This needs to come over just a tad. There we go. In fact, I could probably just bring this over a smidge here. That's better. Just do that for the moment. Let's fix that. A quick fix. Quick fix. See if we can get our thread to baste. There we go. All right. Oh, it's so wiggly. All right, here we go. Try that again. Just tack that. Very good. Okay. So see my weight will hold that so that it doesn't get out of alignment too much here. Okay? That's perfect. All right. So just smooth and baste the rest of the way down, and we should be in great shape. Okay? All right. Lovely. So we're just coming right along. The most important thing to remember when you're doing this is to make sure that your thread is not being pulled too tight. You don't want that, okay? And to do your very best to make sure that your lining is distributed properly on both sides. You have the same amount hanging off this side as you do that side, right? And if you have a little bit of discrepancy, it's not the end of the world, okay? And let me tell you why. Because the only place that this lining is eventually going to be connected, okay, is going to be at the shoulder and around the arm side, okay, and at the bottom. But, you know, so when you take, if you think about it, when you take the basting thread out, the lining is just going to distribute itself into the jacket. Okay, so if you're off a little bit here and there, it's not the end of the world. The jacket will make the correction for itself. Okay, I'm talking about if you're off a ton, like you've got 2 centimeters on one side and not on anything on the other, that's when you're going to have an issue. Okay, I hope that makes sense. It should. Okay. So here we go. Just got a couple more stitches here to get us down to the bottom. Okay, bada bing, bada boom, and we're done with the lining in the back. So right about here should do it. Okay, so once again, we'll turn this over and take a look at the beautiful, so see we've got, I can take these little pins out now too. We've got this beautiful, look at all the ease we have in here, okay? And then what we're gonna do, once we get the 2 sides put together, okay, which is our next step, we'll be able to turn up the length, and we'll be able to also turn up the lining very nicely here as well. And we're going to have some ease at the bottom with the lining, okay? That doesn't get sewn flat. It has a little bit of ease to move around. So this looks lovely. I'm very excited. And yeah, what we're going to do next is a lot of pick stitching. So that'll be fun to get into that as well. Thank you for joining me in the atelier today. If you've enjoyed this lesson, please do like, share, and subscribe. You never know, there might be another tailoring enthusiast or someone who enjoys sewing that would love to visit this channel, and I do appreciate it. And in my next lesson, we're going to be bringing the front and the back of the beautiful swing coat together by basting, top stitching, and pick stitching that incredibly long side seam. You're not going to want to miss it. That's what's happening next time in the atelier.